After years of thinking about it, Chidi has decided that he is finally gonna write a novel. Maybe. No, he's not. Yes, he is. No. Yes, he is going to write a novel. He has had this story in his head forever. The characters are so rich and vivid, and the world is so rich, and he's got plot points in mind. He can see the big picture. He's gonna do it. He's gonna write the book. But first, he has to consume every piece of writing advice in existence. Write every day. No, don't force it. Take breaks when you need to refill the well. Write what you know. Unless that bores you, then write what you don't know. Unless you're swerving into someone else's lane, wait, get out of there. Write about your own trauma. Yes, even if you don't want to. No, not that trauma, that's not trendy right now. Wait, are you using third person omniscient? No. Editors don't like that. First person present? Ugh, that's so pedestrian, but whatever. Show, don't tell, except when it's okay to tell. Hang on, is that a freaking adverb? Wrong. Start with action. No, start with dialogue. Maybe you should start with a rhetorical question? You're 3 sentences in and your protagonist isn't relatable yet, or likable. Wait, now he's too perfect. Make him kill a cat. No, make him save a cat. Write more detailed descriptions. My God, your prose is getting purple. This scene has no conflict. Okay, that conflict feels contrived. Your protagonist isn't proactive and he's still too perfect, and wait, why did he just make such an obvious mistake? Okay, on to page 2. Chidi? Hello? I think we broke Chidi's brain. In the meantime, Eleanor decided to write a book too. She didn't read a damn piece of advice because her book's gonna break the mold. She finishes her draft. Some people offer constructive feedback and she's like, nah. So who gets a book deal first? Well, Trevor. Because of course he does. But I don't think Chidi or Eleanor are getting published anytime soon. Chidi got writing advice overload and Eleanor doesn't want to hear any of it. So where's the balance? I first started writing a book with the goal of getting traditionally published in 2007. I'm pretty sure AuthorTube and even BookTube weren't really a thing back then, but if they had been, I know I would have been watching all the videos. What I did back then was find every author, editor, and literary agent who had a blog. I subscribed to those blogs and I read all of their posts. If they had years of backlist, I went through and read every single one. I also went on a writing craft book binge. I consumed so much writing advice. I went on a hero's journey through writing advice. I crossed the threshold into a whole new world. I found mentors and helpers, and I overcame challenges and went through a transformation and had epiphanies and saw how I would become the greatest writer that the world had ever seen. And I thought about my book, and I thought about my book, and I never wrote that book. I really loved that idea for that book, what would have been my first book had I written it. But I never did. I worked on it. I had spreadsheets filled with plot points. I mapped out a series, if I'm being honest. I had character sheets, and I did write bits and pieces of scenes. But overall, I cheated out. All that advice I'd soaked in just made me freeze up. I couldn't write. No, look, I couldn't even think about my story without some piece of advice I'd read floating up in my mind and being like, no, that's not the way to do it. And that's just the first stage of writing advice overload, because if you really get into it, it doesn't just ruin your ability to write, it ruins your ability to read. Show, don't tell. Except this book that you really love has exposition and you kind of love that part and it really works and you think it's effective, so what? Does that make you an amateur reader now? Or maybe is it that show don't tell isn't meant to be adhered to 100% of the time? Adverbs are bad, except you see adverbs in literally every published book you've ever read. Don't use filler words, except you really love this one author and her dialogue in particular, and it's full of ums and ers and okays. I could go on and on listing all of the most common writing advice that I'm sure you've heard by now, but I think you get the picture. Pretty much none of them are meant to be followed 100% of the time, and authors break those rules all the time, and their readers do not care, so F the rules, right? I am telling you, I would bet $1 jillion that Eleanor's book is not good. If you want to be a master of the craft who breaks the rules, you gotta learn the rules first. Because you have to understand why those rules exist. They do exist for a reason, so that you know when and how and why to break them. I once read a book that, okay, the author was kind of a low-key celebrity, not a writer, had never professionally written fiction before. They got a book deal because of their sort of celebrity status. This was a novel, not a memoir, and they did write it themselves. There was no ghostwriting involved. I read that book and it broke the rules in a bad way. Stylistically and often grammatically, the choices made no sense. They weren't consistent and they didn't contribute to the narrative voice in any way. It was random. Imagine, and this is a made-up example, not something that the author did, but this is not far from the truth. Imagine a book where every comma was a semicolon instead. No commas anywhere. For every sentence in the entire novel. Why did you do that?
Because I'm an artiste and I don't play by the rules.
No, masters break the rules with a purpose. It adds something to the story. It enhances something. It's not done at random, and it's definitely not done because the master doesn't understand how grammar works or what basic story beats are or what a good transformation for a character looks like. A masterful writer gets these things. They understand these rules and then they break them as a stylistic choice, as a way to subvert expectations, as a way to enhance certain aspects of the voice. There's a purpose. There's careful intent. It's really important to study the craft of writing if you want to be a writer. But it's also really important to write. Write words. Write bad words and then look at them and try to figure out for yourself why they're bad and how you can make them better. There's so much talk about authors finding their voices, but how are we supposed to find our voices without playing around with words a little bit? You might need to use adverbs or exposition or just write super purple prose to find your style and your voice and hone it. There is a sweet spot between Eleanor and Chidi, and I think this is how you find it. Yes, I'm about to give you writing advice. In fact, almost all of my videos on this channel are writing advice. Does that make me a hypocrite? Maybe a little bit, sure. But there is only one piece of writing advice I have ever given, and I have given it on this channel, that I believe all writers should listen to. Everything else I've talked about, any other tips or tricks or whatever that I've given, they may or may not work for you. But this one I'm serious about because this one is going to help you get over writing advice overload. Just remember this. Most writing advice is actually revising advice. Imagine if Past Michelle back in 2007 had consumed all of that writing advice and gone on that hero's journey, but she actually made it full circle. She went all the way home armed with that knowledge, and then managed to push it out of her mind temporarily, planted her butt in a chair, and written that book. That messy, flawed, terrible first draft. And then called on all of those magic powers she'd absorbed on her journey and used it to revise that book. I mean, I honestly wonder what would have happened. I can't say that I think that book would have gotten published. I don't know if I would have been at that level yet, but holy crap, I would have learned so much. And I'm sure the next book I'd written would have been way better than it was. If you're experiencing writing advice overload and it's making it hard for you to actually write, flip that switch in your head. Call it revising advice. It's simple, but it works because you're giving your brain permission to absorb and process all of that knowledge. Store it away for when you'll need it. Then play around freely with storytelling and find your voice and write your words. I hope that was helpful. If you know a writer who is struggling with writing advice overload right now, please send them a link to this video. And if you found it helpful, don't forget to hit that like button on your way out. I'll see you guys later this week with another video. Have a great week. Bye.